Lesson 4. The brokerages, DIY versus Robo versus managed accounts, and the trade. The disclaimer. This lesson is designed to cover the basics of brokerages and how to open an account, buy and sell investments, and the differences between do-it-yourself, robo-advisor, and managed investing. Wanting to skip to the Husky games, you can jump to the 20-minute mark or so. So recap from Lesson 3. So we covered passive versus active stock funds and how they relate to fees. We can also compare if active year-to-date and 3-year, 5-year returns are worth the extra fee compared to its passive version. We can also use a benchmark to determine if we were meeting an expected minimum return. We also learned of fixed income in the form of bond funds, individual bonds, and CDs. And there's a caveat for individual bonds and CDs that there's a penalty for redeeming them early. When using bond funds, though, usually we can buy, sell at will without a penalty. And we also have multiple maturity dates within the fund to help boost returns. But the downside is that we pay a management fee, so nothing is for free. Nevertheless, we can compare bond funds like we did for the stock version to see if the higher fee is worth paying. We also suggested to avoid junk bonds. The coupon rate may look enticing, but they carry a great risk. And we also cover target date funds. It's another feature we can use of wanting more of a hands-off approach, where it provides a mix of stocks versus bonds based on a retirement age. And as we age, the fund will automatically rebalance to favor a little more bonds with an expectation of a 50-50 mix. But there are other funds that would be more conservative and may favor a higher amount in bonds. So target date funds are not free, but we can also compare fund fees to see if they meet our expectations. So now on to brokerages. So brokerages are like a store. They are a place, like a website or app, where we can buy and sell pretty much at will any ticker that trades on the open market. So many of us may already be familiar with Fidelity, Interactive Brokers, Robinhood, Schwab, Vanguard, Webull, and many others. So much will depend on our employer, too. So we don't get to choose our brokerage in a 401k or TSP plan, but we certainly have many choices when opening a cash or Roth IRA. So what brokerages do we choose? So that doesn't seem to be a right or wrong answer. Much is really dependent upon public opinion. And we can find many sites that will give a rating for brokerages. So probably bigger factors are, 1, there should be no trading fees, and that's not to be confused with management fees. 2, there should be no balance minimum required. And 3, there should be no inactivity penalty or no minimum trading frequency required. So now we'll compare brokerages. We can perform an internet search, and I like to begin with NerdWallet to get a few ideas. So here's a list for beginner investors, top picks, so you can see in no particular order, but you have the Robinhood, Fidelity, SoFi, E-Trade, Vanguard, Wealthfront, and Charles Schwab. And many of them are rated at 4.5 out of 5 or 5 out of 5. One thing I wanted to point out, in Wealthfront specifically has a 0.25% management fee, and you also need an account minimum of $500. So this appears to be a brokerage that is for beginners who really don't want to manage their own accounts. So a manager will do it for you. I just wanted to point that out because everything else is $0 fees for trades and no account minimum required. Here's another list for brokerages just in general for online investing and stock trading from also NerdWallet. And you'll see a lot of these are on the types of brokerages from the left or also on the right side. So you have SoFi, Public, which is not on the other list, but you have Interactive Brokers, Schwab, Fidelity, Robinhood, E-Trade, and Webull. And you can see their associated ratings. But also point out that they have $0 fees and 0 account minimum. And they have different promotions that you can check out on either list. Obviously, they're for those who are opening an account for the first time. Then we'll cover the DIY versus robo-advisor versus managed accounts. So when you first sign up for a brokerage account, there will be questions in regard to our investing experience. And they'll have suggestions that you might want to sign up for robo-advisor and or managed portfolio assistance versus do-it-yourself. So what should we pick? And even if we're complete beginners, my recommendation is to purchase a total market index, SPTM, which we've discussed before, and put it in our cash or Roth IRA account. And later, maybe we can do some research with a Robo advisor and managed accounts to decide if that will work for what we want. But first, what exactly is a Robo advisor? So it's a robot. And when signing up, we will answer more questions that are used to calculate a risk tolerance and time horizon. And it's a little like what a target date fund would do. So it works on an algorithm and is built on passive investing ideology. So it will use low-cost index funds. But the management fee is 0.25 to 0.50% AUM, and that means assets under management. And how that works is it's charged each year as a percentage of assets, and then it gets simply adjusted from the stock shares already in your account. So what exactly is a managed account? So it's a person versus a robot. So rather than do it yourself or a robot, we use a professional financial advisor. They will choose investments for us, also based on a questionnaire or interview, but they can also be used for tax strategies and estate planning. The downside is that advisors are not perfect, as they're human, so they do not guarantee beating or meeting the average of the market, and their typical fees are 1% AUM. So why go robo-advisor or manage if we can simply do it ourselves? So this is the point of these lessons. We can do it ourselves without the help of professionals or robo-advisors and save from the AUM charge. However, it can only be determined by the individual. So the questions would be, are we committed enough to review our investments on our own to see if changes need to be made down the road? Or for that matter, will we know enough to make the correct changes when it's needed? And sometimes experienced investors still choose to own variations. So the majority of their money might be in a portfolio of their own design, meaning self-directed or do-it-yourself. But then a little might go to a robo-advisor or another to a managed account. So the managed account may be set for other goals, like they need to live on for the next decade or to bequeath as an inheritance. So maybe they'll put more money into that. Other reasons may be a worry for old age and dementia as we get older. So we might make bad decisions and then lose it all versus paying for the peace of mind for it to be managed. And there isn't a right or wrong answer in these cases. It hinges on individual and our circumstances. And for purposes of this lesson, though, we will focus on do-it-yourself investing, since that will give more details on how to purchase a stock and indexes and understand how to set limit or market orders and understand what the spread means, difference between ask and bid prices, and overall understand trading volume and just how a trade works. So on to the trade. So buying and selling stocks. As an example, we can use the Schwab webpage to set up a trade. I'm more familiar with Fidelity and Schwab sites as I use them exclusively for my retirement accounts. But navigating one site should be pretty close to another. And just a little background, how many brokerages I've been through. I began with a low-cost brokerage that was called Daytech in the early 2000s, and then later it was bought by Ameritrade that also merged with another company. It might have been called TD Waterhouse, I don't remember, but then later it was called TD Ameritrade. And then finally, TD Ameritrade was purchased by Schwab a few years back. So I've had several platforms to learn, but I found that they really are not that much different from each other. So when I first log into the Schwab account, the site usually starts at the account summary screen, and that would be listed here. But instead, I'm going to go to the position screen. That's where I like to start, and that's where I can see all my stock positions. And just for my privacy anyway, I'm not going to show my balance and amount of shares that I own, but this will give an idea of the index funds that I currently carry. So here are ETFs. You can see I have SPTM, Silver, VYM, which is a high dividend ETF, SPMD, which tracks the S&P 400. They're mid-cap companies. And then I have the International, BXUS, which I highlighted. That's the one we're going to look at. And then I also own XLE, which is a energy ETF, and then XLRE, which is a real estate ETF. So currently, I have $647 in cash, dividends that were recently paid to me. So I'd like to buy more VXUS, and that's a Vanguard International ETF, which I highlighted on the left. So I'm going to use the trade with stocks and ETFs drop down. And you can see it here. And then I'm going to enter the ticker symbol VXUS. That'll be located here on the next screen. After you click that, and you'll be able to enter your ticker. If you don't happen to know the ticker, but you know the company, in this case I know it was Vanguard, you can simply enter Vanguard, and then you'll have a few choices that will pop up. And then if you still can't find it, then you can just do a general search. But eventually you'll get to memorize these ticker letters. So now I'm going to select Action, Buy, since I want to purchase shares, and then I'm going to put the quantity to 8, because that'll get me to close to the amount of money that I have available. And I'm also going to set a limit of $75.96, which is its current price. We can also see other numbers throughout the left graphic, which we'll get to, like the bid, ask, and the volume we'll go over. But also note that I'm placing the order when the market is closed here. So that's fine, because it'll be active on the next trading day. If all is correct and we have the funds to cover the trade, the order will be received. So we can see that an order to buy 8 shares of the VXUS at limit $75.96 was placed, and there's my order number. So my order was made during trading hours, and the current price was at or below my set limit. This case would have been $75.96. Then the order would have been successful within minutes or less. Usually goes through very quickly. So note that the pattern is you enter your order, you verify your order, and then order received. Now, if there was a problem here with your verify, like let's say you didn't have the money to cover the purchase, then it'll let you know that. And that'll just be, I think, erroring out on your verify order screen. But if everything looks good, then you should get this order received. And as a reminder, VXUS is an ETF, which means that the price can change up and down by the millisecond. So if I decided to go with the mutual index fund version, then I would purchase by NAV pricing, which we covered in the last lesson. But the pattern of buying is the same between buying a stock, ETF, or index fund. We set the amount of shares that we want and set the limit or a market price. Then you verify and place the order. So note that I had placed a limit order, which means do not purchase until the price is at or below $75.96, which I highlighted here. Here's your order type limit. But I could have set it for market, so that'll be in the other drop down. And that might have been okay to do, but a market order simply means to purchase as quickly as possible. But if the price was a jump, say to $76, which I'm not willing to pay as high, then the market order would still have gone through. But with my limit order at $75.96, it wouldn't have gone through. The reason that I stick to limit orders is that I can guarantee a top price that I'm willing to pay. Market orders simply attempt to purchase at the ask price that could go up within minutes, and it might not seem like a big deal. However, the market price will often sell to the higher price, versus, when you get to set the limit, have a little more control. So know that the bid price is at $75.65 here, and the ask is $75.96. So the difference between the two prices is called the spread, and in this case, it would be 31 cents. And this is how brokerages will make their money in each trade. So I'm willing to pay the ask of $75.96 as the buyer, and the seller is also willing to go as low as $75.65. But sometimes the final sell will meet somewhere in the center, about $75.81. But this may not always be true. So with a market order, we will simply get the seller's ask price, the higher one. And that can change up and down based on supply demand, but a limit order will guarantee the price that we set as our maximum. The downside is that it is possible our limit order will not go through, and then we must try again the next day. And that's fine. But for my example, I'm okay with $75.96 ask, since 8 shares was all I could buy with the $647. But I could have put in a bid, say for $75.81, which is somewhere in the middle. But I may not get that price, and I'd have to try again the next day. So similarly, if you were the seller, you would try to get the highest price possible, the ask, with the hope of getting the better deal. And that's the same ideology as the bid. We can set a limit order to meet in the center of the bid ask, or you can lean all to the ask or all to the bid at the lower price. Usually a bid ask spread can be within pennies of each other because of a much higher trading volume. So we're going to compare two examples of well-known companies, NVIDIA and Amazon. And we'll see that generally a higher share volume, the amount of shares that are being traded, will equate to narrower bid-ask spreads. I'll bring up NVIDIA and Amazon. So notice that NVIDIA has a bid price of $188.05, and then ask is $188.07. So that's a 2-cent spread difference. And it trades at 65.5 million shares currently. Amazon has a bid of $232.01 and an ask of $232.18. That's a 17-cent spread, and that has 11.4 million currently trading shares. So you can see this is about almost six times the amount of volume, and that's what type of difference it makes. So narrowing the spread with more volume and less volume, the spread starts to widen.